Hello, zwlemon here, coming with the last video in our tournament series. This is going to be a recap of my match versus Anders. So, unfortunately here, I did not record my match versus Anders. Game 4, I realized, oh snap, I had not recorded this game, and I never uploaded it to YouTube, so I was thinking I would do that right now. So, as you can see, is I'm already spoiling the match. I did not win here. So the main purpose of this video isn't really going to be showcase the match, but since the tournament's been over for a couple weeks, the main purpose is just to analyze these games and look at some of the things that we could have done better. And obviously, I'm not going to really go through the entire game, but I'm just going to go through key points of the game and key things that I think I could have done better. Also, I need to mention that game 1 unfortunately does not load when I try to load it in the Dominion Online load game screen. So that one's going to be lost to time, but I did lose game 1. With all of that out of the way, let's look at games 2 through 5. Alright, so looking at game 2's board, we see a lot of interesting things here. It has draw with laboratory and emissary and vault. The only thing that it's not going to have here is it doesn't have village support. There isn't any plus actions on this board other than laboratory and rebuild, which means that there's not really a lot of terminal space to play really a bunch of actions. So you'll notice here that it's going to be a pretty simple game for the most part. It's most likely going to be a race for single provinces. Since we do not have any villages, we can't really support big engines here. We're just going to have to race for the end. So from here, we are second player. So my opponent gets an Oasis, and I'm going to get a Salvager in this game. And he'll get a Salvager too, which he got in the original game. I'm playing Will Raddington at the moment. And I got a silver in the opening. So my general strategy here was to go for laboratories and to draw my deck here. So my general strategy here was going to be to go for laboratories and to draw my deck through that so I can consistently get to the point where I can province every turn. With also a Salvager in deck, that means I could also be, if I was ahead on provincing, then I could essentially in my last turn trash a province with Salvager, buy both provinces, and end the game on a lead. That was my initial plan, and I think it worked pretty well, except for one pretty bad decision. Alright, so during this point in the game, I had a pretty tough decision to make. I didn't know how I was going to split these fives here. Now, what I was thinking about considering is I wanted one laboratory for sure, but I didn't know if I wanted to get a laboratory or another two laboratories or a laboratory and an emissary. Now let me show you this. Emissary is a card that if you trigger a shuffle at the end of your shuffle, then you gain at least one action and 2 favors, What this means is that if you trigger a shuffle of this card, then this card is not played terminally, meaning that you can play more actions after playing it if you cause a shuffle of emissary. Now I'm going to buy one right now and show you what I mean, because in the game what I ended up doing is I ended up buying a laboratory in this critical position and an emissary. Alright, I should be able to draw deck, so that should be pretty trivial here. So ideally what I thought is, because I would get to the end of the shuffle when I would play an emissary, I thought that I would be able to play this Salvager also, because I thought since I got to the end I triggered a shuffle. However, there's a mistake I made. The mistake was this. Since I got to the end of my shuffle, and since I have no new cards to cause a shuffle with, that technically did not cause a shuffle, meaning that this benefit of getting actions and favors is something I didn't have. Now that's going to be a pretty important factor as to coming as to why I lost this game. This is a game where you have to kind of play quickly. Let me show you what happened at the very end. So here's my last hand. So I'm just going to play it out how I played in the real game. So first thing I want to do, and by the way, I got a laboratory and emissary in real game. At this point, I already trashed my emissary with the salvager and used that to gain a province. But by this point in the game, the laboratories are already spread out. So, one of the sad things, here is kind of a sad thing. To win, what I need to do is I need to draw one more copper. Now, in the game, I had one card down here. I don't know why it's two cards down here, but in game I only had one. I needed to draw one more copper to win the game, you know. If I had bought an extra laboratory, instead of buying a laboratory and an emissary, that would have given me one more draw card I could have drawn, and that would have allowed me to draw my entire deck. Now, the difference between drawing my entire deck would have been pretty simple. I already used my Seize the Day, which gives you an extra turn, so this is my last turn. See, what my plan to do was here, if I had one more copper, is I would have trashed this province, which would have gave me an 8, and I would have bought double province. And the reason I would have done that is because I would have ended the game with more points. And that's kind of the whole idea behind what my strategy was for this board. Now, unfortunately, I did not, because I bought the emissary, I did not have enough to draw my entire deck, meaning that at the very end I had a copper bottom deck, which caused me to basically lose the game. Alright, so in the next turn he does, since he has a salvager also, he's able to do what I do. But in game I buy a duchy here, which would put me at 24 points. However, his next turn he's able to buy province, so he provinces and then trashes his province with salvager, so he can get 2 provinces, and that's how he wins the game. If I buy a province here and he buys a province, then he just wins. Alright, so now we're going to look at the board for game 3, you know. Now, I just want to not spend a ton of time here, but I think I can pretty easily explain what happened here without really having to go through much of the deck. Alright, so now we are here with game 3. Now, this game was a little interesting because what ended up happening was I missed a pretty crucial component of this. When I first played this game, I thought that maybe the problem was I tried to build an engine where an engine really wasn't practical here. But as I looked through, my opening, I actually agreed with a lot of the decisions I was making, So I opened Underling here, which gives you a favor, and Order of Astrologers is basically when you re-trigger the shuffle, you get to pick what card goes on top. So kind of like a star chart, I believe. Yeah, it's a star chart, I believe. So kind of like a star chart. And I opened Exorcist as well, which I thought was a pretty good open, And I was looking through my deck, and I was wondering why did it not perform as well as my opponents. And I really missed something here that was pretty crucial. I missed a crucial engine component. Now, for here, I thought that my main source of draw was going to be exorcisting like silvers into imps, Which is good draw, and I think it is something I could have incorporated into my deck. But there's some really important draw card here that I actually missed. And that here is Apothecary. I didn't include Apothecary in my deck because I wasn't thinking of it being draw. But Apothecary is very much a draw card. Of course, it's a little janky. It could be a little weird. Basically, you look at the top 4 cards and see if there's any potions or coppers. It basically draws those. But I think the main reason we ended up losing here was mostly just due to the fact that we didn't really incorporate apothecaries, because if you look at the log, we actually do hit our exorcist. Basically, the reason you open an exorcist usually is because you want to trash your estates with exorcist into Will-O-Wisp right here, which can be pretty good draw card. Sometimes your exorcist will be like, you'll draw an exorcist and 4 coppers or something, and that's usually not what you want with exorcist. You don't really want to trash coppers, though you can if you want to with it. It's mostly good for trashing estates and silvers. But I mean, we hit all of our exorcists, so I was curious as like what happened. We hit canal turn 7, and the main thing is, yeah, we didn't include Apothecary. And Apothecary was draw here, and I think realistically our deck would have performed a lot better if we had just included Apothecary. Also, I did have at some point a Candlestick Maker buy, which was not really a good idea personally, to be honest. It didn't really add a lot to my deck and mostly acted as a stop card that didn't need to be there. So that's really the other mistake I made. So here, I think it's just what we can learn from this is we should probably try to look and see, like, if we can. Sometimes you'll just miss it even if you're looking for it. Because here I was a little nervous during this game, but just see if you can find any like clever ways to draw. Which here Apothecary would have helped us to draw our deck more, and if we drew our deck more, we would have had a more successful engine this game. Anyways, my opponent has 2 Apothecaries, and that's sort of how he's able to build a reliable engine. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about this game. It's just I think it would have turned out a lot better if I had used Apothecary in this game. Alright, so now we're at game 4, and game 4 has a pretty interesting board here. One of the things you'll notice right off the bat is that there is little, and by little I mean there is no terminal space at all. There is no village of any sort here. There are a couple of cantrips, here. Like we have Destrier. It's not really a cantrip because it's +2 cards, but Destrier here you gain it's +1 action, meaning it doesn't give you any more actions, but it's enough to replace itself. So our only 2 cards like that are Destrier and Skirmisher. Skirmisher being an attack card that basically when you buy it, when you have it in play and you buy another attack card, the other opponent has to discard down to 3. Other really important cards here. Sea Witch is usually pretty good, but none of us really opted to play Sea Witch this game. Probably for a good reason, which I'll explain later. We also have Replace, which is like Remodel, except if you gain a victory card, the other person would gain a curse. And if you get an action card, it gets top decked, so it's a pretty good card. Falconer technically can also be played without using an action, since it's a reaction card. So when someone gains a card with 2 or more action types, you can play your Falconer and you can get a card as well. My opponent used that to get Destriers, which is pretty good, but it's not something I used in my game. So Guardian is a card that costs 2, and it's a knife phase card, so you play it, and while it's in play, you cannot get attacked, so it's going to stop all attack cards from affecting you, and you also get +1 coin the next turn. We also have Masquerade, which is a pretty good card. Basically, you draw 2 cards, and you send a card to the opponent's deck, and you receive 1. You choose a card to swap, and they choose a card to swap, and you have the choice to trash it or not. So this is a very powerful card, So with all that out of the way, I have the basic layout of the board, also their Salvager, which will come in important later. With a basic layout of the board, let me just show you how things opened. So my opponent goes first because it's game 4, and I went first game, so he would go first this game. So he has 3 coppers in hand, so he gets a Guardian. So getting a Guardian, you can immediately put that into play, meaning the next turn he's going to be able to hit a 5. Now unfortunately for my hand, I don't know if you can tell, this is turn 2 by the way, not turn 1. For my turn 1, I had 4 coppers, so I could not pull that Guardian stunt, unfortunately. Meaning I couldn't buy the Guardian and get a 5 on my second turn. So the choice I ended up going with was Masquerade, which is which I did it because 1, it's a trasher, 2, it's a draw card, and 3, it's just a good card in general, Anyways, and then my opponent gets a Replace, and then I opened with a double Masquerade here, which ends up working pretty well in my favor, honestly. Luckily, this is a good thing for me. One of my Masquerades is bottom decked, meaning that I'll be able to play both my Masquerades in this shuffle, which is going to be pretty dang good. Alright, so one thing I want to say about this board is that there are a couple of pretty interesting targets here. You have Skirmisher, and you have Destrier, really. I think those are the 2 cards that I start building my deck around. Generally because, 1, Skirmisher attacks are going to be very good when you can get the opponent to discard down to 3, especially in a game with limited building and mostly big money strategies. Skirmisher is going to be a very good card. It won't hurt my deck really, except maybe withdrawing with Masquerade. It's going to generally affect me a lot better if I can make sure he has less good turns than I do, you know? The other card is Destrier, and that's just so I can draw more of my deck. One of the reasons you want to go for a deck draw above maybe big money if you can a lot of times is because draw relies you with more consistency as opposed to big money, which can have sometimes very lopsided turns. Having proper deck control will allow you to avert those, to at least have better turns more consistently. So yeah, basically here the summary of this game is Destriers and Skirmishers are my main targets, you know, and it also becomes the main targets of my opponent as well, obviously being good cards. But there's also one key interaction that's going to go on during this game. So Guardian, the thing about Guardian here, my opponent has 2 Guardians at this point, I believe. No, actually, yes, my opponent has 2 Guardians at this point. One good thing about Guardian is that Masquerade sort of operates like an attack, but it's actually not an attack card. So like if you look at these, like Skirmisher is an attack card. So Guardian can block Skirmisher, it can block Sea Witch, it can block replace attacks. All these attacks are things that Guardian can block, but Masquerade is technically not an attack, even though it operates like one. So that's one of the things I think that really helped me here, is that I could get around his Guardian and give him some junk in his deck, while also kind of trashing and drawing mine. So that was just very good overall. And I think one of the things that led to this game being one of my favorite, though it was a very close game. Alrighty, and the second thing that really helped me here, and I'm playing the last turn of the game, the second thing that really helped me here was buying a Salvager. Now, I bought a Salvager pretty late in the game, and Salvager ended up doing a lot. By the very end of the game, my Masquerades were colliding with each other. With Salvager, I was able to 1, get a buy and get rid of cards that I did not need anymore. But 2, it allowed me to pull this maneuver. So this is basically milling, and I think a lot of you know what milling does, but just in case you don't, I can play Salvager here, and I can trash this province since I get an extra buy and I get 1 extra coin for every coin of the card I trash. So I can trash my province, which could be a little scary because I go down points, but it allows me to buy both of these provinces, which in turn allows me to win the game. I think getting a late game Salvager ended up being very good for me. 1, because I could get an extra buy and get rid of unneeded cards, but 2, it allowed me to pull off a pretty close win here. You know, it was obviously this win was not by a lot, but it was a pretty good game at least. You know, we were at least able to come back and squeeze this one out, which I'm pretty happy about, all things considered. Don't really know if there's much I would do differently in this game on the second time around, but I think the strategy I went with was probably close to the best, and there really was a simple board, so there wasn't a ton I could do here, but it worked out in the end, so I'm pretty happy about that. Alright, so on to Game 5. Game 5 was, I'm just not gonna lie to you, this was a pretty screwy board, and just for a couple of reasons. So there were only 2 sources of draw here, and like literally only 2. The only 2 here is Apprentice and Research. Also pretty dang important cards here. Counterfeit's going to be strong because it is going to be the only real copper trasher here. And also there is no villages on this board, meaning that the idea of playing multiple bridges is really out of the question here. So why am I saying it's a screwy board? So it's kind of screwy, and it would have been screwy if I won or not. I didn't win this game, but even if I won, the board would have been screwy. So the reason why it's screwy is a lot of times this board really just comes down to shuffle, you know? Like, sometimes you can land your Apprentice, but it's like your Apprentice, you trash a card and you gain 1 per every you gain a card for every coin the card costed, you know? So that can be pretty good, you know, especially if you have high value cards in your deck. If you draw Apprentice, you know, Apprentice, copper, Apprentice and a bunch of coppers, that's not going to help you at all, Or if you draw Apprentice and you don't land on really great cards, it's going to really affect the way you draw this game. Same with Counterfeit. Counterfeit is also really dependent on Shuffle. So it doesn't affect things as much if only one person is going for this, because this is realistically the superior strategy on the board. But if both people are going for this, a lot of times, being really honest, it can come down to Shuffle here, which it does. I'm not saying my opponent didn't identify the strategy here and he didn't play it well. He did. There's also another thing that I did not mention yet that's very important about this board, is Alliance. So Alliance is a 10 cost event that allows you to gain a province, a duchy, an estate, a gold, a silver, and a copper into your deck. Now that's very good for a couple of reasons. One, obviously you're getting a lot of victory points. But two, you're also getting a lot of fodder for Apprentice and Counterfeit to trash in order to have, really, really big turns, So this board's really kind of about having really big turns and hitting Alliance a bunch, kind of. I don't play this board perfectly. Let me show you, I think 2 mistakes, that I think I could have done a little better. Alright, so we opened Tiara Silver here. Now, our open was, so we had a 4 and a 3. Turn 3, we got 4, so we bought in our research. You'd like to hit 5, but it's okay. This is a pretty good turn anyways. So it's turn 4. So we have 5, and we have the Tiara effect, meaning that when I gain a card, I can put it at the top of my deck. Now, originally during this game, I think the card I went with was Apprentice, and I top decked Apprentice. There's a kind of a reason for that. Kind of the reason for that is I really wanted to get my draw going as early as I possibly could. However, I think a better move might have been Counterfeit, and I'll tell you why. Even though I want Apprentices really bad in my deck, I also am going to want Counterfeits. And the thing is, I've already bought a Research, which is essentially like an Apprentice. It's exactly like an Apprentice. It's the exact same concept, except basically next turn, instead of drawing your cards that you trashed this turn, you draw it next turn. So I went with Apprentice originally. However, I believe I should have gone with Counterfeit, and here's why. I already have an Estate Trasher with Research, and while getting a second Estate Trasher is not even that bad of a deal, I think I would have been better served if I had started going for coppers first, because I already have a card that's meant to trash estates. So I believe that if I had gone a Counterfeit, I could have probably got some much needed coppers out of my deck, and probably could have done a little bit more. Though it is debatable, because Counterfeit and Apprentice both have an important role to play in this deck, and they're both very good, so it is a bit debatable here, but I think Counterfeit might have been a little bit better. Alright, now we're looking at turn 9. So right now, me and my opponent are both right on the verge of starting to hit our alliances, So none of us has hit it yet, but I'll tell you a mistake I made this game. So this is a pretty good hand to have. I have both Apprentice and Counterfeit in it. I definitely want to hit Alliance as soon as possible. Now the question is, do I use Apprentice on this gold or Counterfeit on this gold? Now originally when I played this game I used Counterfeit because I was afraid that if I used Apprentice and drew 6 cards, I wouldn't draw enough to have money for Alliance. And that's kind of the main purpose of gold here, is to be kind of trashing fodder for Apprentice and Counterfeit. But look what happens if I trash gold right now. So this is turn 9, and I've already, at this point, I've already thinned my deck a considerable amount. So if I were to have trashed the gold there with Apprentice, I would have drawn my entire hand. Now here's what I ended up doing in the game. In the game, what I ended up doing is trashing the gold with Counterfeit, and I bought Alliance. Now there's a reason this isn't as good. The reason this isn't as good is, one, if I trash with Apprentice and I draw my entire deck, one, I can trash just way more junk out of my deck. Can trash a lot of unnecessary coppers in my deck. And 2, I can already get Alliance if I draw my entire deck, which will regain the gold I lost and all the stuff, you know? And 3, there's room for some extra stuff as well, like maybe I could do Alliance. I could top deck this gold. Probably don't want to top deck the silver. And maybe I could have just top decked a research, you know? It works for both being Apprentice fodder and it could secure a good turn next turn, you know? So I think really using Counterfeit there was a bad move and really limited what our deck can do. And I think it, honestly, if I had probably used Apprentice there, I probably could have won the. Well, I wouldn't say won. I would have been more in contention for winning the game. It still would have been a really close game because it's about hitting Alliance and stuff. Even if I don't have a great turn this turn. Okay, so I couldn't actually hit Alliance and and use research here. Yeah, I mean, I would have had the choice if I want to hit Alliance or Province, which, let me show you the original game. Yeah, so if you see in the original game, so I get Alliance first, but then my opponent gets Alliance right after me. So then next turn I have a dud hand. Next turn he gets an Alliance. Next turn I get an Alliance. Then he gets an Alliance. Then I have another dud hand. So he gets an Alliance and a Province, and it's like, yeah, I missed Alliance twice, so it's like, yeah, really missing Alliance really hurt me there, and like, basically he hits it more times than I do. And basically here, what I think I could have done way better is, if I had played turn 9 differently, I could have been in at least contention to at least hit Alliance more. And I think that could have kept me more in the game. Now, it still would have been debatable if I won or not, you know. I'm not going to say, oh, if I didn't just make a different turn 9, I would have won. But it's a mistake I made, and it did end up costing me this game. So I will own up to it. So yeah, that's sort of how this last match went. I think there's some things that I could have improved on here, definitely. Going back and looking forward, looking through it, there are definitely some mistakes I made going through it. And I guess that's the thing with what you lose. If you lose, you can kind of go back and look and see what you did wrong. And there are some things I did wrong. There's some things I definitely did wrong during these games. And, you know, all you do is you look at it, you go back, and you try again, man. That's the only thing you can do. But it was a good game. GG's to my opponent. And yeah, I will see you soon.